Hi, Nick Dogue, North State Law. We safeguard your professional license so you can get back to business. I got a special YouTube video today. I got my good friend, Matt Kerekes. He's a licensed real estate agent in North Carolina, works at Bliss Real Estate powered by LPT Realty, and he's been licensed in North Carolina for 13 years.
Yep.
Welcome aboard, Matt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
It's
yes,
exciting.
his arms are that big in person as well. So today we're going to talk about some common complaints that I see in North Carolina, and Matt's kind of obviously have a wealth of knowledge to kind of go over some things and fill in some gaps as well. So Matt, I don't know if you've seen much of any of this stuff on I mean, I know you've never received a complaint, but I don't know if you've seen like a colleague or anybody on any of the common complaints that we're going to talk about, but
Yep.
we'll dive right in. So the three most common complaints that I've seen are not running a proper trust account. That's most common with property management companies. A lot of stuff going on there. Practicing law without a license, that's essentially creating legal documents. That does happen a fair bit. And then the last one, which is a biggie because you're talking about how it affects the general public, is misrepresentation of material facts. And we'll get into a deeper dive on that. I know Matt does, because Matt's helped me buy a house and helped me sell a house, so he knows what he's doing. So Matt, let's talk a little bit about like the trust account compliance. And I know you don't do property management. And by the way, all this is related to residential real estate. We're not talking about commercial real estate. We're just talking about residential. That's the most common.
Different animal.
Oh yeah. From my understanding, it's a completely different animal. So with the trust account stuff, now correct me if I'm wrong, but to be able to have a trust account, you're looking at being a BIC yourself, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so to have a BIC, you got to work under a BIC for 2 years.
Correct. It's something they call it being BIC eligible.
BIC eligible. Okay.
And you need to be you need to be not provision status, fully licensed, a full broker status essentially.
Gotcha. And then obviously BIC is broker in charge. That's going to be the lead person at the brokerage. So what we've seen with the trust account snafus by people with running property management companies is it's usually a situation where they're just not running very good trust accounting software, or they're not keeping up with it on a spreadsheet. That's the old school way of doing it. When I had a trust account, I did it probably too many ways, but I do spreadsheet. I used a trustbooks.com. It was geared towards attorneys. My understanding is there's other ones available for real estate agents, I believe. And what I've seen in the past is it's not so much that, BICs that were running a trust account were stealing from the clients or anything. It was more of there was no three-way reconciliation, or some of the things didn't line up when the deposits were made or when it was cleared to the bank or things like that.
Right.
Easy fixes, and usually as long as somebody like realized that there was an issue and they are proactive in fixing it and getting somebody like a CPA involved that maybe specializes in trust accounting, that's the stuff that the real estate commission is going to look at and go, okay, you guys realized you had a problem, you were very proactive in fixing it. Maybe they didn't realize it until there was a complaint, but they went ahead and fixed it without being told by the real estate agent.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of like one of the biggies. That's like with when we had a trust account and I was running it, that's one of the things that'll get you in trouble real quick as an attorney too.
The interesting thing about trust accounts now, and maybe we might start to see these complaints taper back a little bit, is that brokerages are not required, or certain brokerages you don't necessarily have to have a trust account anymore. Almost, I would say the last 2 or 3 years, almost every contract, every listing in the MLS, it will say, brokerage does not hold earnest money. I remember when I first got into real estate, I was delivering earnest money to all different brokerages across the city. But now, and I think it's always been this way. It's just it's never been interpreted this way. But you don't necessarily, as a brokerage firm, you don't have to have a trust account anymore. And so the attorney, the closing attorney, they're the vehicle that holds the earnest money now for almost all of the transactions, at least all the transactions that I've been involved in.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, because this complaint is probably still one of the top ones, is like you said in the beginning, is that it maybe gets affected when there was property management involved. What's interesting, when you think of real estate in North Carolina, at least, and you think of brokerages and you see signs, you think of Remax, you think of Keller Williams, you think of EXP, LPT, Century 21, all these different brokerages that are around here. But what's interesting is that over half of real estates, or half of real estate agents, do not belong to a big brokerage. Essentially, you could consider it a mom and pop operation, where there may be less than 10 agents, less than 5 agents in a brokerage. So they have a broker. There's a broker license. ABC Realty, and it's a husband and wife team or whatever, and they're, one of the things that they offer is property management. If they're, like you just got done saying about, if they're not accounting for that money correctly, and if they don't have a proper trust account set up, that's when somebody could find themselves in front of the real estate commission, or the board of ethics, or complaint board. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
having a little blank there, but yeah, the complaint board. So that's what's interesting, and so people need to be really careful with whenever you're dealing with monies. That used to be, that's one of the things that, when you would read the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure,
Yep.
one of the bullet points was account for all monies during the transaction.
Yep. Yeah, and that's going to be a big one, dealing with people's money, pretty much every single profession. But
Right.
it sounds like, from what you're saying, is obviously, real estate agents, attorneys, handling trust accounting,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge one for both professions. So
Yeah.
the next one that I've seen pretty commonly, and from my understanding, reading some of the bulletins from the Real Estate Commission, this one's pretty big. It's creating legal documents, basically practicing law without a license.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a good bit. Now, having gone through a number of closings myself, or either buying or selling a house over the years, I've kind of noticed there are purchase and sales agreements.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to cut down on even the temptation for real estate agents
Mm-hmm.
to create any sort of legal documents. Is that right?
Yeah. So for North Carolina, there are North Carolina Real Estate Commission documents that every licensed North Carolina agent has access to. And we're talking about working with real estate agents, standard listing agreement, standard buyer agency agreement. There are documents involving rental properties, property management agreements, lease agreements, and then there's all addendums to them as well. Short sale addendum if there's foreclosure, or if it's a vacation home. I mean, there's so many different addendums that you can attach to a contract. Additional provisions addendum in general has a bunch of different bullet points that you can check on, like if you want the seller to make some sort of repairs before, included in the offer that you make. While you're under contract, there's something that is called a due diligence request form, and this basically is a form that a buyer is going to fill out, and their agent to ask the seller to make certain repairs to the home while they're during their due diligence period.
Okay. Yeah. And then if there's something funky that pops up, you're obviously going to end up at a closing with an attorney.
Mhm.
So you have somebody available there to create a legal document outside of an addendum or something along those lines,
Mhm.
right?
Right. So the big thing with closings and attorneys is that, and maybe you can you might be able to shed a little bit of light. Is it likely or is it possible for an attorney to represent two different people?
On the, what do you mean, the buyer and the seller on a closing?
If there's a disagreement.
Oh no! So you got to look at it like the V being versus. So if it's like John Doe
Mm-hmm.
versus like John Smith, and
Right.
they're adversarial against each other on the opposite sides of the V, it's a no go,
Right.
100%.
So, what's interesting is what I've, over the years, what I've noticed is more times or not, the buyers typically will pick the closing attorney that they would like to use. And then oftentimes that seller will sometimes use that attorney as well to prepare their seller documents. You know, Sometimes you will have a seller who wants to have their own attorney prepare their own seller documents, and that is something that I do recommend the sellers have, or at least give them that option to
Right.
let them know, hey, you can use the buyer, the closing attorney that the buyer has picked, ABC attorney. You can use them if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. They'll charge you their standard fee to prepare the seller docs and stuff like that. However, if there is some sort of a disagreement or if there is some sort of an issue, that attorney defaults to representing that buyer.
Yeah, good point. And then when I'm talking about like the V and there being a disagreement, that's what
Mm,
Matt's bringing up. Like, because once there becomes a disagreement, it's adversarial and you got one side versus the other side. Well, the attorney that was representing your example, the buyer initially, he's going to default to the buyer, which means the seller's going to have to find their own attorney anyways,
right,
because that attorney's conflicted out at that point, can't represent both sides at that point when it comes to
right.
getting the documents together. There's typically not an issue.
Mm.
You're right, though. It's always good to have your own attorney, even as the seller, to make sure everything is going
Just like
kosher, looks good.
some people, it's good to have your own real estate agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, as the representing you on the buy side, you may not want your agent to be a dual agent and represent the seller and the buyer, which is completely legal in the state of North Carolina. But it's up to the consumer to decide if they want to be in that sort of a relationship.
Yeah.
To kind of circle back to your question or the topic of practicing law without a license. You could find yourself in a situation, or you may find yourself in a transaction where a fellow agent has created some sort of a document.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be something simple. I mean, it might be something that doesn't seem that important or seem that big, but it is still, you're still drafting a document that you're asking parties to sign.
Yeah.
And if that document isn't, I mean, if you don't have a license, if you don't have a degree and a license in law, what are the chances that document is actually written in a way that protects what you want it to protect?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is the whole point of going to law school and getting a degree.
Right.
Yeah, and so you have the knowledge base to do all that. So, all right, well, we'll move on to the last most common complaint that I see from North Carolina Real Estate Commission, and this was also on North Carolina Real Estate Commission's top 10 list. But this was a misrepresentation of material facts. Obviously, like I mentioned before, this is a big one, and let's talk a little bit about on your end when you do a lot of buyer side stuff. You
Mhm.
also are seller's agent at
Yep.
times. When you're putting something on MLS, you've got to do your due diligence. You got to make sure that the information you're putting on there is correct. There is a portion in the administrative code that talks about reasonable reliance,
Mhm.
but obviously that's subjective and nobody wants to get themselves in trouble. So kind of
Right.
take us through a little bit about like, if you're coming up with square footage, for example, what's
Right.
something common that you use to confirm what the square footage is?
Yeah. So I don't even, I don't. I don't try to add anything extra onto my own plate, and I use the power of leverage.
There you go.
And so we always hire a licensed appraiser to measure the property. When you do that, you also get a detailed floor plan, which in turn can be used for marketing material. Obviously, buyers may love to see an actual floor plan I mean, there's a couple, positive points to going ahead and doing that anyways. But the main thing is making sure that we have an accurate measure of the house. It is, I don't know if I'm, it's pretty well known that the square footage in the tax record is not accurate.
Right. Yeah.
So it's important to know exactly what the square footage is. A great example is we listed a home for sale not too long ago. Gentleman's been there for 14, 15 years or so. Couldn't really find any of the documents, and I don't believe the house was previously in the MLS either, so there wasn't a whole lot of back data to go off of. Tax records, would have maybe it said like 2,600 square feet, give or take. And he was pretty, he was pretty, pretty adamant about that. He was pretty sure about it. Got a licensed appraiser in there to come in and measure. Turned out that the home was closer to like 2,900 square feet.
Nope.
That difference, though, that difference when you talk about $200 a square foot, $250 a square foot,
adds up.
It absolutely adds up. So it is in the agent. It's in the agent's best interest and in the seller's best interest to have an accurate measurement of the house. Now, I've always been told you have 10 different appraisers come in and measure the home, you're going to get 10 different figures. But there is a threshold of range of error that you can have.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's in there's a North Carolina Real Estate Commission residential square footage guidelines brochure, and we'll put a link to that in the description of the YouTube video here, so you'll be able to click on that and get access to it pretty easily. But they specifically mention that in their brochure.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think you might have alluded to at least a little bit, but they also talk about the buyer reasonably relying on the seller, like the buyer's agent reasonably relying upon the seller's agent for the square footage. But then they also talked about like that little bit of grace for an error. It could be like your example was like 2,500 is what you listed as, but it's really like 2,456. That's such a small margin.
Right.
That's going to be in that error window, and it does say that on their brochure. So yeah,
I think the other main point to keep in mind is North Carolina is a buyer beware state.
Okay.
And so what that means is that what most people should take away from that is that if you are a buyer in this market, or you are a consumer and you are looking to purchase real estate, it should be really important for you to have some sort of representation to you, because that representation is going to take you through the process for, step by step, and provide you those expectations of what to expect next. If you're a buyer and you walk into a home that's 2,500 square feet and you're walking through it, and you're in your gut, you're saying like, man, it feels like it's only like 2,000 square feet. Like, it doesn't feel like 2,500. If you have an agent with you, a buyer's agent representing you, it's that responsibility of that buyer's agent. If you were my client and you had doubts about the square footage of this home, the reason why I keep a lasered measuring tool in my car is just for that exact reason. Go measure the house.
Yeah.
And at least, I don't need to be 100%, accurate or on the dot with that number. But if I get done measuring that home, and it's a thing, it's a lost trade, I think. A lot of agents used to have to measure all their homes in the beginning. And so there's a lot of agents that might not know how to measure a home, how to deal with a staircase, how to deal with bathrooms. Um, so measuring the home, if after I'm done with it, it comes out at like 2475. Okay. Well, okay. So we're 2500 is not far. We're not too far off of that.
Yeah.
If I get done measuring it and I'm only coming up with 2200 square feet, then that's a conversation to have. That's a conversation I'm having with the listing agent, and potentially with my BIC, possibly.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. All right. So again, Matt Kerekes, LPT Realty you're in Cary and Raleigh. Is that right?
Downtown Cary.
Downtown Cary.
Right next to the park.
Yeah, there you go. So if anybody is in need of a very experienced, very good real estate agent in the Wake County area and subsequent areas, Matt Kerekes is your guy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put Matt's info and his brokerage in the description as well. If you got any questions for Matt, you can reach out to him through the information that's provided there, or you can touch base with me. I'll provide you Matt's personal cell phone number. I'm just kidding. But no, I'll provide you Matt's information if you need it. But anyways, I appreciate everybody joining us today to watch this. Matt, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Yep.
So that's going to wrap everything up. If you got any follow-up questions on anything, please check out the blogs on my website, northstatelawfirm.com. You can also watch some other videos that I have on the YouTube channel. If you still can't find what you're looking for at either one of those spots, then you can call or text us at 919-521-8810, and you can get a free 15-minute discovery call with a member of my staff. So thank you very much, and keep selling North Carolina. Bye-bye.